Hello, hello.
Good
Can you hear me?
afternoon.
It is a good afternoon.
It is a good afternoon for you. Yeah, cool.
Okay, great. This is my first time ever live streaming with someone, by the way.
Oh, is it? Oh,
It is.
I thought that you've done it a million times before.
Nope. This is one of those things where like learning how to be a faker your whole life is you're just really good at faking it until you make it. So people just be like, oh yeah, she's done this, so let's go do it with her. It's like, yeah, no, I'll just figure it out in the moment.
Literally my whole assumption. Yeah, I apologise for making that assumption.
Oh, good. So first off, the people who are joining live, let us know in the comments that you're here, where you're tuning in from. Keep in mind that the comments that you leave don't stay after we publish the live stream. It's like the shitty part about Instagram. But it will be published all over on Instagram as well as YouTube. So there'll be places for you to continue the conversation that we're having. And because it's going to be published on more than one platform, we'll start with like real introductions.
Oh man.
I know, hot spot, right?
Yeah.
So
this is so in with like the subject, and this is so a place where I'm just like, oh fuck. Yeah, okay. Woo!
Okay,
my name is Rae. Yeah, my name is Rae. And this is actually probably the first time I've said this online. I have been practicing saying this to people in person, and it's slowly getting more comfortable, but I'm a spiritual teacher. It took me a really, really long while actually to say that to people, you know, like when you meet strangers and I'm like, well, I'm kind of like a therapist. I'm not even remotely a therapist. Let's just be clear here. I am not a therapist. Like, and they go, like a life coach? And I go, yeah, like that. I'm not a fucking life coach either.
No, you're not.
I am a spiritual teacher, and because I used to be a somatic therapist, and that is something that I am qualified in and used to practice, I create experiences for people that are very somatically focused. And yeah, we explore things through a spiritual lens.
Perfect.
I'm not sure what else to say.
No, that's great. You're so much further than I am, because I still have not grappled with the word spiritual teacher. It's like a big edge for me.
Yeah.
So congratulations.
Thank you.
Being a spiritual teacher to me is like, oh man, one of the ways I get off easy is just be like, yeah, I'm a coach.
Yeah, that used to be.
Right? Like I don't have to own the gravity of the work that I teach. I don't have to own the transformation that people get when they work with me. I don't have to own any of that. And I don't have to, in not owning it, it also means that I don't have to hold the gravity of it. I get to be flamboyant and ridiculous and all these other things while simultaneously dismissing the intensity of what it is to work with me. And this is something that I'm like having to fix. I know, I do too. Most people do. But like what ends up happening is people come to work with me and they're like, oh yes, she's gonna be so much fun. And they're like, holy fuck, it's like getting fucked in the ass with no lube.
Yeah, okay.
Right? And it's like, oh, they were expecting some like juicy, like wet dripping pussy energy. And I'm just like, nope, this is not what it is to work with me. And so there is this spot where like owning particularly your friggin' medicine as a spiritual teacher is like essential. And that's just not an edge I've been willing to lean into. So like, thank you for that little call out.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. And this was great practice. I'm glad you actually invited me into that. Yeah. Intro.
And because like, you know, Instagram, YouTube, we get sent all over the place. I'll introduce myself as well. Hi, I'm Stef. For those of you joining us live, you already know that. But for those of you watching the replay, on the surface level, the best way to explain what I do is that I help people navigate the topics of ass, cash, and sass. Super fun, flamboyant, like we just talked about, right? But there's a depth to each one of those things. When I'm serving anal alchemy in any of my containers, it's about the groundedness and the grounded requirement of power. There's lots of people who want power in this world, and the moment that it lands in their body, they're like, oh my god, I got anxiety, I need to go get medication to like just numb this out. And it's like, what did you think power was going to feel like? And so when I'm serving anything related to ass, it's about power, it's about grounding it, it's about really being in your body. And then when I serve cash, it's like, I was an accountant for a decade. I have way too much applicable knowledge to hoard to myself. So basically I give it all away inside of my financial intimacy containers. And then Sass is just, you know, it's that part of the personality that I'm not willing to let go of yet and actually step into being the intense teacher that I am when people come to work with me. So that's me. And all of our links will be in the bottom here on YouTube once it's all published. And then if you're on Instagram, if you want to reach out to Rae or I about what we're talking about here or working with us deeper, you're more than welcome to do that.
Cool.
Shall we get started?
Shall we get into it? Yes. Let's go.
So I'm going to have you introduce the topic because this came up so the topic today, see me, hear me, Unmasking Invisibility. It started because you had written a Facebook status, a poem, a transmission of sorts, around the way people comment on your content, from what I remember.
Yeah, I'll actually just get it up. What I specifically said, I should be able to get that up relatively quickly. But I had recently just an experience online that had inspired this particular piece. I'm just scrolling lots. A minute, here it is. I'm almost there now. Oh man, come on. That's it. So I basically said that I have this tricky thing where I don't know if I can be a no to people using my comment sections as a platform upon which to hear the sound of their own voice without it resulting in my vilification. And perhaps I need to make peace with that. That was what I had initially written, and then I went into a little bit more detail about breaking it down because it was a really important thing for me to be able to break down, and especially publicly, because up until a certain point of being on the receiving end of it, I actually, when you have this thing that happens and you're like, I don't understand why this just feels so fucking weird, but it would just kind of be there and stick to you. And there came a point then when I did have language for it, and it was really important for me to actually give language to this thing and to also feel my own just like rootedness in it and rightness in it as well. And not feel like an arsehole, because I have battled with feeling like an arsehole for this boundary.
Of course. So let's break it down into like a couple layers of abstraction for those who are kind of new to what this even means, right? So what prompted this? What inspired this post? What was going on?
So on a couple of occasions, and then there was a particular occasion that week, but it's happened on a few occasions where I've had people reach out to me in comment sections, and you can feel that they want to like connect with you and they want to share their experience. But what ends up happening is that I read a kind of it reads as unsolicited advice. And like this particular one, I read it, I was like, I'm not even sure if you're talking to me or if you're, it's like stepping up onto the stage and I'm there and you want to connect with me, but you're turning out to the world and performing it to the world. And then I'm like, it feels really disconnected.
Yes.
And underneath that, I can really feel the want for a connection. Like I have a lot of compassion for it, but it's a very odd thing to be on the receiving end of.
Absolutely. So I think, so when I saw that you posted this, I was like, oh, we need to do a live stream on this because this happens on YouTube all the time. And because I've been leaning into creating YouTube content, it's like what I've realized was there is this way where people just want to hear their own opinion through someone else's mouth. And so when you don't say their opinion, they need to make sure that you know what it is. Yeah. In hopes that you'll say. And
I can imagine YouTube is like really, really big for that.
Oh, it's awful. But so is like TikTok, like all platforms are. It's just about like who you get exposed to, right? And I mean, it is what it is. I usually just engage in the comments in a really like sassy way. But what I've noticed was there was this certain quality of where you're right. It's like you're not even talking to me because the content of what you're speaking to isn't the content of what I've just said. Yeah. Right? It's like they take one word and they're like, she talked about rain, so therefore we're talking about chemtrails. Like, what? Yeah. Where did you, how walk me through how you got to that particular thing? Because it's not resonant with the conversation I'm having. It's not, it doesn't actually vibe with it. And one of the things that I really loved is a couple years ago, I remember I had posted something on Facebook and middle-aged men tend to be the worst for this because their entire lives, no women have adjusted them back to the frequency. But what they'll do is they'll pick one thing that you've said and they'll run with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I had a friend of mine who's very attuned to like the feminine nature of energetics. And he replied to this guy and he goes, show her that you can stay on topic.
Oh.
And I was like, oh, that's the thing that I was like craving. Because when someone's not on topic, it feels super extractive and like they just want to hear her own voice.
It feels like I think I've just got this language in my head now because I've just been doing like a written transmission today about the VR headset. It feels like they read something. It's like the VR headset scans it, and part of me doesn't like to use computerized language for human beings, but I find myself doing it a lot. But it's like the VR scans it, picks up on something, and it like hits some kind of identity program in the VR. And then they just run away with that. So it's like whatever it is never actually got into them. It hit something that was on the front. And often I found with these types of comments that I get that I'm reading them and I'm like, you're just saying things. Like, yeah. I don't even know what you're saying. Like, I can't even, not only can I not feel you, what you've written actually doesn't make any sense.
So there was a reel I did, I don't know, probably a year and a half ago, where the audio of it was like, oh, that's a lot of words. Too bad I'm not reading them. Because it's just like this string of words that I'm like, I'm better off reading Excel formulas and trying to deduce what it's trying to communicate to me than I am reading this, because we give energetic transmissions of something. When someone is completely unreceptive, they're not receiving what we're saying, like in their bodies. It's not embodied reception. And so then it's received with their mind, and that's where something gets triggered. Yeah. Right? Like if it's in your body, nothing really gets triggered. But if it's in your mind, there's a story, a narrative, an experience, a past trauma, whatever, that gets initiated, and that's what makes them run for it. Mm-hmm. But what I love that you said is like, you can feel the desire for connection underneath it. Yeah. Because if they didn't desire to have connection, they just wouldn't comment. Right. And this is the thing that admittedly I really grapple with. And there have been, and I will be totally honest with you, I can recall one occasion where again, I tried my best, but when I look back on that particular response, I was like, oh man, like it was a bit of a blunt force there. But this time, you know, I get warmer every time, you know, I'm able to open a bit more every time, but I have found that the reaction has been the same every time, and it's that I discover what they really think of me. Because it's like, I find with these things, when they get reflected back, it's like the action, like something that was bubbling underneath the whole time comes out then, and it's often some kind of inferiority complex that then projects onto me as acting superior. The whole defensive thing that comes up a lot. I'm defensive. I always get told that I am defensive for having I guess requests around how to be in connection with me in my own house. Oh, I love this, because this is the line of, you posted online, therefore you are open to fair game criticism. I got that this time as well. It's like, no, well, you're fair game, you should turn comments off. And I'm like, oh right. Like I'm really struggling with that one, actually, with the idea that I should be fair game. Oh, so this is a really fascinating one, because it happens in Hollywood all the time. Well, they chose to be celebrities. The paparazzi should, right? That like paparazzi should be able to take photos of their children because they're celebrities. Well, that's what they chose. That's the cost of the career they chose. But you know what? Do you know what? Now we're talking about this, and I'm saying, oh, I struggle with that one because there's this thing in me. But you know, also, let me just like call myself in on this. I can remember a time, I don't know how long ago it was now, it'd be some time ago, where I held that belief system of your fair game. I'm just bringing this up now, and I'm like, oh, I remember when I used to feel that way. Like, let's just get into that for a minute, and where was that coming from, and what was underneath that? And it actually, how do I put this into words? It's the living out of the projector screen, and I'm coming back to the VR headset, which, well, it has us misuse sight. It really comes back to the sight piece and seeing and thinking that we can see things that other people can't.
And thinking then, and again, thinking that if you're a public figure, inverted commas, and you are in your own space speaking, that if I can see something that you can't, I get to tell you about that. You're putting yourself out there, so I get to tell you.
Right. I get to, because you have a blind spot you can't see, I get to violate you by giving it to you.
Yeah, but then as well, and then it feeds into the whole thing. And I remember also having this judgment when I witness people have their own boundaries around it, where it's like, oh, well, you're just avoiding disagreement. You just don't want to let other feedback in. And I can really see now just the absurdity of that whole thing. I'm like, oh, wow.
Well, and listen, so I never believed that personally. I never believed that celebrities were fair game, that public figures were fair game. There was a sense of separation where I was like, but that's their career. That's not their home life. And so for me, there was always this separation between what you do for work, what you do for resources and money is separate from who you are at home. That's kind of the identity that I grew up with, which also supports a lot of the patterns that I have around compartmentalization, right? A lot of hiding of the vulnerable pieces because what's out there is fair game. Like the career, the public persona is fair game. Okay, yeah. So I have to hide all of these like vulnerable pieces. Yeah. But what I will say is that
because I want to say first, go on. I just want to say first before we go on, it wasn't necessarily about celebrities. It was more about the internet space. But yeah, go on. Carry on what you're saying. Yeah.
So when I became more of like outspoken and louder on the internet, and I'm not even that loud. Like, let's be honest, I could be so much more out than I am. The thing that I kept getting was like, well, you're just creating an echo chamber. And I really had to sit with that. It's like, am I unavailable for disagreement or not? And one of the things that came up was like, I pay people to deliberately disagree with me.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's why
that question too.
Right? Like, yeah, I work with teachers we don't see things eye to eye. I go into spaces where discussion is at hand because it's civil discussion, like that's what it's meant for. But my space, the online space that I hold, I don't give a fuck about your disagreement because you're in my online space. You just have public access, but never is this a public forum.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like, exactly, that's not the way that everybody wants to hold their space. Some people want to be a public forum, but I don't. And the fact that people think that they're entitled to my comment section being used as a public forum means that they demand a delusion that they're going to continue to have access to when they use it that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Most people, if they're going to use my platform in the comment section as a public forum, I usually respond being like, that's not what I'm talking about. Take your bullshit elsewhere. I did this with someone who commented it like they dropped a Bible verse on one of my videos. And I was like, brilliant. I was like, lost. I was like, this isn't a necessary comment on my content. And then they're like, well, Jesus would fill that void. I was like, at no point did I say there was a void. So again, your comment isn't resonant with my content. And they kept going back and forth. And I was like, listen, just because I have it's public access, right? Yes, I am a free for all because you can comment. You can comment 100%. You can comment whatever bullshit you want.
Yeah.
To expect that I won't delete your comment, to expect that I won't block you from accessing my comment is actually delusion. That's where the entitlement is. It's like you think you can disrespect the space I'm holding and continue to still have access.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's like the same concept when it comes to celebrities. It's like people are like, well, that's the career they chose. It's free access. It's like, yeah, well, look at Freddie Prinze Jr. and Sarah Michelle Gellar. You thought you had free reign on them and they just pulled their life away. Like their life is actually quite private. Yeah. You lose access when you disrespect the boundaries that people put in place.
Yeah.
And so in the spot where you were like, I'm really not sure, what are the debates that kind of come up for you in terms of how you want to manage your space?
So that first thing that came up was when you were talking about disagreement, like that's something that actually sat with quite deeply is like, okay, so what is my relationship to disagreement? And at this stage, because I have come quite a long way with and been on quite a journey with being misunderstood, right? And being heard. So my relationship to the internet and being on the internet and teaching on the internet has been such that this thing has been prodded quite a lot. And I really want people to understand. And, you know, like I had to really sit with that as well, because it's like, actually, there came a point where I was like, I don't do this to bring people around to a point of view. That's not the fucking point. Like, that's not what I'm here for. I'm not here to control the perceptions of other people. And I think this is another place where people can feel a little, like, feel that entitlement to coming in and laying down the law, because they believe me to be coming from this place of trying to control the perceptions of other people.
Right.
And they're like,
it's like,
what you're saying is wrong, you know.
Well, yeah, and so they feel like there's something to debate again.
Yeah, and then when I come to the thing with debate, it's in terms of being disagreed with, I'm at this point now, because I used to feel this defensiveness and I wanted to engage in some kind of discussion, and oh God, you know, like the sludge that would descend, like energetically, like my whole body was like, this is not the thing. But actually, at this stage, I feel like I'm actually so at peace with your disagreement that I don't need to defend myself in the face of it, you know? I don't need to do that. So when people leave comments now, I kind of decide actually whether I'm going to respond. And my practice has also been, because I used to hate not to respond. I used to hate to just leave things there. But I've also been practicing leaving as much space as possible between when something comes through that's perhaps inflammatory or entitled, and leaving as much space as possible before I do respond, if I do respond. And something always kind of clicks there where I'm able to show up in deeper connection. And even if that person can't meet me in that connection, and every so often they can, and that's what makes it all worth it. But it's like that space is transformative for me, because it's like hard, man. It's so fucking hard, because I have to let all of the charge settle. And I still don't always quite manage it, and there's still some things that are a little bit hard and crunchy, and when something comes through, but the more space I can leave, the more in connection I can be. And sometimes that's me just not responding to you.
Absolutely. I love that. I don't have that practice. I'm such a fighter.
Yeah, I mean, that's totally my home, like, default setting.
I'm such a bitch. Like it really does take me, like, you know, it does take a lot of space. And I think this is where the internet is wired to not give us space. It is there's feedback loop for instant response. And so if someone comments something somewhat inflammatory, the algorithm is kind of supported by me instantly responding with whatever charge, meeting the charge at the same level, right? And so it takes a deep spiritual practice to be able to say, I'm not going to respond to that, even though there's a positive feedback loop if I do.
Yeah.
Even though there's a positive feedback loop that my brain really wants, that my dopamine really wants, that all of my chemoreceptors are like vibing off of, I am not going to be a victim to my hormones, and I'm going to slow shit down and say, well, what am I committed to? And it sounds like with you, you're like, I'm committed to connection where connection's available.
Yeah.
And so sometimes someone is completely unconnectable. It's like, yeah, leaving them unread or leaving them alone that's the level of connection that's possible there.
Yeah.
And then in some other places, it's like, oh, the connection that's possible there is actually for me to soften to the level I can to be able to have that conversation. For me personally, my chemoreceptors really love the fight.
Yeah.
Because it's also a place to like burn my energy.
Yeah. It's a way to, like, and that's what it feels like for me. Like, the addictive edge of it is like, I've got this thing and I just need to, like, get rid of it. But I think something that has made it really like imperative, like that's something that has made the practice imperative, is I have this kind of like very, very tricky, busy, loopy mind and a lot of grooves. And one of the grooves is when I am in like a confrontational interaction online where there is space and it's not face to face and it's just in the moment, I'll loop around what I'm going to say. I'll loop around. So the practice is actually just being able to like put that down, because when I can put that down and just be present in my life, the connected response just drops in out of the fucking sky when it's ready to drop in. And it's got now where it's too fucking painful. There's too much unnecessary suffering involved in me going, can't stand it.
I think that's the important part, right? It's unnecessary suffering to use your energy in any other way than to take space for yourself and let like truth come through.
Yeah.
Right. And like this is something I'm teaching on the Facade path. It's like you're either going to gaslight yourself to follow the martyr and like sacrifice yourself in some painful experience, or well, simultaneously as you do that, you're going to what I call a glamour. You put up a glamour. It's a facade. It's some sort of presentation. And I think most people do this when it comes to online content because they want to be perceived online as inclusive, as open, as someone who's totally available for debate, even if it means that they're sacrificing their mental health to do so. Right? So when we're looking at online content, it's like, okay, we get some sort of inflammatory comment. How, like, first level, I see that you want connection with me and you don't know how to get it because the only level of connection you've learned in your life is to get it through pain.
Yeah.
Pain is connection. Like, I just want even those watching, hatred and love are both connective experiences. Indifference is disconnection.
Okay. That's, yeah.
So if you're coming in with me with like love, acceptance, acknowledgement, that's as much as connective experience as inflammatory criticism and feedback. It's still connection at the end of the day. But if you're truly like disconnected, uninterested in me, we're disconnected.
Yeah, I don't even show up on your radar.
Exactly. And so this is where the concept of hypervisibility comes in.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that actually, what your take on that is.
Yeah, so hypervisibility is actually an invisibility pattern.
Yeah.
How I know.
I think I really deeply recognize this one too. Yeah.
It's my pattern where I will walk into a room and everybody will know me, but no one will know me. Right? Like when we have people commenting anything, it's got an edge of please see me. And it just so happens in today's day and age, inflammatory comments get the most attention. And so all you're craving is to be seen, is to be heard, is to be felt in life, then what you're naturally inclined to do is to do the thing that causes the most sensation in others.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, I've never considered it like that.
Right? So like for me, what has typically caused the most sensation in others is to lead with my sex.
Okay. Yeah.
Right? So when I walk into a room, that can cause a lot of inflammation in someone whose sex is totally off.
Yeah.
It causes obviously a lot of inflammation in the fellas who are attracted.
Yeah.
But it's not actually the truth of me. It's the facade I do to get some sort of mimic of connection.
That's really got me considering what my brand of that has been. What has it been? Man.
Well, it's worth mentioning.
I really don't know.
Go ahead.
Go on.
It's worth mentioning too that not everyone has a hypervisible invisibility pattern.
Yeah.
Right. The whole
I think I have it online. I think I have it online, but not out in the world. And I was thinking out in the world, and I was like, oh, actually, I just don't think I have that out in the world. I think I just have a fuck off, don't bother. Like my thing has been just a fuck off, don't bother me.
Yeah.
Cloak.
It's like, look at me, deal with it. Right? Like online, it's so easy to be that because, and I want to say, like, particularly in the coaching, the spiritual guiding, the teaching spaces, there is this like, be visible all the time. And it is done with literally, they use the word hooks, hook in your audience, right? Yeah. So there is this sense of, can I manipulate those who see me to feel something?
Yeah.
How I get to feel something, it doesn't really matter. It can be sexual, it can be provocative, it can be intense, it can be political. Literally, once you go online and you start reading through people's posts, you're going to see it. You're like, oh, their glamour is just to put some intensity into my body so that we're connected in some sort of way. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you're connected in truth. Now, it's worth mentioning because not everyone has a hypervisible invisibility pattern, which is like, hi, look at me out here, but don't come touch the tender bits. I want whatever false form of connection possible. Others have cloaking invisibility patterns.
Yeah.
And if you have a cloaking invisibility pattern, it's literally that you do not exist in the world. So they're the opposite spectrums of the same pattern. One is look at me, but don't see me.
Yeah.
And then the other one is don't see me because you can't.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't see me because, well, don't, but I also feel in it like a kind of please see me, but don't see me. Please.
Please.
But also,
No,
there was such, like, when I feel into it, it's such a like deep dissonance, like the deepest desire is the deepest fear. And I was actually thinking about this. I had a really quite unexpectedly intense experience a couple of weeks ago, since like this site frequency that I've been working with and bringing in has like really worked its way deeper. And I had this memory of when I was about 5 years old. I think it was like reception class. It was really small, and basically the teacher asked someone to volunteer to be Angel Gabriel at the nativity play, and I raised my hand, and she was like, cool, you'll be Angel Gabriel. And then shortly after that, I got chickenpox, and I was too ill. I think it was chickenpox, too ill to go to rehearsals, so someone else had to take my place. But by the actual night of the nativity play, I was just about well enough to take part. So I was like handed an angel costume, and I remember, because I hadn't been to any rehearsals, it was kind of like just shove me on the end, and I was like basically on the very end, barely obscured from view, and I could just see the girl who had stood in for me with the big star on her head right at the front. And fuck me, like what I realised that I hadn't realised, and this memory has always been in the shallows, like it's something I've always been able to recall, but suddenly it was like it dropped in and hit something that I'd been holding for a really long while, and this enormous well of grief moved, of this kid who like internalized that experience as meaning something, that somehow I had been punished. And I saw this kind of stream through of how I'd recreated that experience of feeling overlooked and like a spare part and invisible all throughout my school years, all the way through into adulthood. And while that particular memory wasn't the origin, I think it was actually something further back, even more primal and possibly pre-verbal. That was a really significant moment, and it was so innocent.
Oh yeah.
It was so innocent. I just got chickenpox.
Well, and you know, that obviously makes so much sense. Like our childhood wounds, we just recreate because it creates the familial or the familiar neural group. We know what to do if we're overlooked.
Yeah.
We don't actually know what to do when we're fully seen. And, you know, because I have the hypervisibility and visibility pattern, a lot of it, you know, when I look at when I was a kid, it was like when I was performing, because I'm funny. I'm not gonna lie, I'm hysterical. And I just naturally was that way, that I learned very early that the funnier I was, or the more loud or brilliant or radiant I was, the more people would pay attention to me. And what that ultimately transformed into was the more dramatic I was, the more attention I. And so and part of that, the contrast of it is like, I'm a highly capable woman. I know how to do shit. I can get things done. And when I looked out into the world, you know, I saw family members who were always in problem, getting a lot of love and attention. And then when they turned to me and they're like, well, Stef, you're fine. You're fine. You're going to be fine.
Yeah.
It was like, okay, I get it. I'm going to be fine. But like, I still need love and attention too. So let me be dramatic. Let me be so loud that you can't fucking miss me. That you not paying attention to me would look bad on, right? And so if I look at my life, like the reason why people often think like, oh, Stef, you're totally arrogant. It's true. I am. I'm very arrogant. Because I needed to be able to get someone's attention. Because if I wasn't arrogant, loud, proud, whatever, then I would go totally under the radar and definitely not get.
Yeah. Okay.
And so it was like this compensatory thing. And it wasn't until, I want to say until I was like 23 that I realized what the fuck was happening. I was at a training for orgasmic meditation. It was called an ITO. It was like a one-day workshop where you learn about the philosophies of the practice and the actual practice itself. And I remember, you know, Brenda Frederick?
Yeah.
So she was my ITO teacher.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah. And she had asked me, she was like, so what brought you here? And all of a sudden, just words came out of my mouth. And I was like, I think I use sex as a wall. And she like looks at me and I was like, I don't think I've ever been like safe enough to let someone all the way in. So I just give them sex. So they never ask for more.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's hitting something.
And it was like this deep awareness that a lot of my sexual energy was actually a lot of bravado.
Yeah.
Right? It was like, let me show you my sex so then you don't see like the tender, like deep, like lush lover that I actually am. Like, let me give you the hot, the spicy, the whatever on the other side, just to entertain you, to distract you from like the intensity that I am. And Brenda's reflection was like, I think you're scared of your power, which fucked me up.
Yeah.
And I think it still fucks me up. But what was interesting though was like that was just the smallest opening around, wow, like I have this persona that I put on and this like deeper thing that I hide. And then I went into my coaching certification program, which had me be in LA every other weekend, or every month for a weekend. And I had a friend of mine come up to me and he was like, Steph, can I talk to you for a second? And I was like, yeah, what's up? And he's like, when you walk into the room, everyone can feel you. Remember how I said like this visibility is like I'm here to invoke sensation in people. Everyone can feel me. There's no doubt about it. You can feel me. He's like, and most people are going to get distracted there. They're going to get lost there. Just in the fact that they can feel you in the room. And I look at him and he's like, but I want to know what's behind it. And in that moment, I felt so fucking naked. I felt so naked. Yeah. Because in that moment, it was like being caught.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the best way that I can explain it, it's like the feeling of, going back to celebrity, it's like what I imagine Marilyn Monroe must have felt like when she realized there was a camera on her and JFK, like that.
Yeah, fuck. Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Like oh no, I've been caught. I've been outed. This personality that everyone knows me as, this individual or this group of people can see that that's just a front. And they know now. And at the time, because I was still in my early 20s, I definitely collapsed afterwards. I recoiled so hard. I shut off my sex. I didn't want to talk to people. And here I am in an orgasmic meditation, weekend, totally shut down because I was like, oh my God, I got outed. They know that this sexual facade or this totally turned on woman is not really the full truth. Now, what I want to say is that the hypervisibility, it's it takes one truth and it just blows it up.
Yeah. Yeah.
It doesn't mean it's not true. It just means it's put on a limelight. And the thing is that's starting to be how I look at how people interact online too. What is their hypervisibility so they can get my attention?
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense.
Right? And it's going to look different for everybody. Some people are going to pedestalize. Oh my God, I love you. Rae, you're so great.
Right. That's actually, and I haven't had that in a while, which is great. And actually, when we had our initial, when I was kind of introducing the initial discussion that had actually brought this topic up and why we were talking, I remember that being one of the projections actually, that I was clearly only wanted people to come on and express their admiration. But the piece on pedestalizing, that's actually, when that used to happen, I think at first I just used to get a little bit ooh, I used to just get a bit taken by it. And actually since then I've been wondering how would I respond to that? It actually hasn't come up again, and I'm just thinking maybe that can't actually get in so much anymore. I'm not saying that I won't see it again, but I am curious to know actually how I might hold that if and when I see that again.
Well, going back to the thing that I said, love and hatred are both forms of connection.
Yeah.
It's if I love on you, I'll be connected to you. If I hate you, I'm going to be connected to you. But neither are really resonant to what's true, which is just perception. Because you can feel the difference between someone blowing smoke up your ass and someone actually being receptive to the words that you've said.
Yeah.
Right? And this goes back because we were also talking about the performative nature of language.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where the string of words, it's here's just a bunch of bullshit. It's coming out of my mouth and I'm hoping you're going to connect to it. And you're just what the fuck are you talking about?
Just saying things.
Things. And particularly in the spiritual spaces, this happens a lot. And I know because I have this pattern too, where you just say a lot of words.
It's funny you say that, because I still, when I'm thinking about performative expression, I was actually pondering this earlier. I still comb this out of my writing. I still look at some posts from even a few weeks ago and I'm oh, wasn't quite, it's getting cleaner, and the practice is getting more refined. But I do want to be honest and say that I'm still always combing through that. It's like a continual practice. And the other thing that I wanted to say as well is, when you're talking about there's a difference between someone blowing smoke up your ass versus being receptive. The thing about the being receptive is that you can actually be in disagreement with me there and be in connection, because there's a way to be in open disagreement with me without actually pulling at me for a fucking debate. You can actually, there is a way to be like, oh, like this is what showed up for me, and these are the thoughts that I have, without it actually being. And really interestingly, I had an experience with someone else online a little bit of a while back, where she had come in with that premise of connection in disagreement and in something that showed up for her. And actually, when I came back through it, the signs were there at the beginning, but I engaged in that connection because it felt connected. But then there was this point where she came in and said, I think that you should have used these words. And I sat with it, and I didn't feel a whole lot of sensation when I got it, but I still spent a good 24 hours, and then I was like, okay, I'm good, I'm just going to go back and respond. And was basically like, I really appreciate the perspective that you've brought, and I really appreciated this discussion, but I was like, but I draw the line at being told what language you think I should have used. Like, I'm just a no. I've combed back through this. I'm like, that was very neutral. There was no charge. But again, it didn't... It was actually a particularly discombobulating experience, because there wasn't a fight there. There was a full response where the person actually came into my inbox to check in. Are you okay? And it was almost like, whoa, because you could feel under the, are you okay? The fuck you. And anyway, yeah, I mean, things didn't, I don't think things devolved, but that was a tricky interaction to be in.
Well, again, if we think about how most people interact online, it is a performance.
Yeah.
And one of the performances that I particularly don't vibe with is the trauma-informed hypervisibility.
Yeah.
Right? It's so disconnected, because it implies that there's only one form of connection, and it's with love and blowing smoke up your ass. It's like this doesn't, I had someone say, this does not feel trauma-informed. And it's like, oh, I'm really sorry that you came in with the projection that it would be.
Yeah. Bye then.
Like, bye. And they're like, well, that's just expected. And I was like, oh, that sounds like your expectation, and you falsely expected that from me.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I realized in that is that, like, most of the time we're using some sort of shield to connect through, and not realizing that shield, that mask, is deeply disconnected.
Well, yeah, I think the thing that I found with trauma-informed language, which I was very in for a while, especially when I was doing somatic therapy and I was reading all of the trauma books, it was a thing. But what I've come to discover is that actually there's a premise with trauma-informed language that means that the only connection that I can enter into with you is inherently codependent. Like, there's actually no real connection there. I can't claim to be a safe space for you because that's not connected. Like, there would be no way of it not being a codependent connection.
Right. Because you, as the holder, you would have to be holding the conversation with everyone you speak to, under the pretense that, everybody has trauma. No shit. Yeah. But you would have to hold the conversation a little bit differently than actually being connected individual to individual. And I think this is worth saying, right? It's like, listen, if you're one of my clients, I hold space for a lot of shit. But if you're just a stranger on the internet to expect me to be trauma informed with your trauma, you don't pay me for that. You don't pay me to hold space for your traumas. And expecting me to do that because you won't scroll past my content because you find it inflammatory or whatever, because you won't hold yourself as what we're talking about, giving yourself space online, seeing if that's a conversation you want to participate in. It's not up to me. And I think too, part of the reason why we mask and we put on these fronts and we put on these performances online, it's not saying that we don't do it. We're just pointing out that the alternative of being fully revealed, of being fully connectable, is inherently sensational too. It's just a truer sensation. Right? It's not like I'm blowing smoke up your ass, making you feel so loved because I want some sort of connection with you. it's because the connection we feel is true between us.
Yeah.
Neither one of us are performing. Neither one of us have a charade. Neither one of us have a mask on. Both of us are revealed. Now,
yeah.
what tends to happen, and like I was writing a post earlier this week about it, and I haven't posted it yet, because being totally revealed makes me nauseous still. But one of the things that I wrote was like this circumstantial unveiling, where there isn't, like, there's very few people out there, I mean, aside from us in the spiritual spaces, where like, I'm going to be connected no matter what. I'm going to be revealed no matter what. Usually it sounds something like, I'll be as revealed as they're revealed. I'll be as honest as they're honest.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Like,
yeah.
I'll meet you where you're at, instead of being like, this is who I am.
Yeah.
You don't have to receive.
Yeah.
But
I was talking to someone earlier, about this, about how the practice is like, can I be me here? Can I be me here? Can I be me here? And we can tell very, very compelling stories about why I can only be a certain amount of me here and a certain amount of me here, and maybe this percentage of me here. Like, it really is a incredibly confronting thing to accept that actually the only real true practice here is, can I be all of me in all of these places?
Totally. And like, I'm always an advocate of like 1% closer.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean,
it's like, I think this is where people get nervous and they're like, oh, but that's going to be reckless. And it's like, no, because you're not going to be able to be fully revealed in all places. It's impossible because you're so cloaked in other places. For example, I started doing dating as a practice at the beginning of this year.
Yeah.
And the premise of that practice was not to just go out on dates. I've been in other containers where that was the thing. It blew me out. But dating as a practice was specifically about, how revealed can I be?
Yeah. Okay.
And so I would go on dates and I would just watch myself. And there was this one date in particular where, there's 2 dates that I want to talk about. First date was like, I was just really revealed and I could feel it and he could feel it. And we were fundamentally incompatible. Like, not a damn thing were we seeing eye to eye on. His view on life and my view on life were radically different. His view on things like shame, like he was one of those guys who really get off on shame. And I'm just like, oh, that's so boring.
Yeah.
Right. And, but what was cool about it was that at the end of the date, he sent me a message and he was like, I just want to say it was fascinating to feel you so open, even though we're incompatible.
Right. So what I was thinking as you were talking then was how you could both be totally revealed to one another. And even though you were totally not on the same page in anything, that wasn't even awkward. You could both see clearly by virtue of the fact that you could see each other clearly. So it's an easy conversation.
It was an easy conversation. And like, because we could see each other clearly, we didn't need the other person to be different. And seeing each other clearly, we could receive the truth of one another and whether or not we were compatible, right?
Yeah.
And that was like, I laughed because I'm like, it's objectively the worst date. Like, I could name 1,000 women who would be like, oh my God, I went on this date with this polyamorous man. Oh, like, and just freak out about it. And for me, I was like, man, this was objectively the worst possible date. Best date of the year. Best fucking date of the year. I got to be who I am. He got to be who he was. We had this great conversation. Did we see each other again? No, because why? Why force ourselves to fake compatibility when we could just acknowledge that we're not for one another, right? So I had this beautiful, beautiful experience with this guy. I mean, it was like a month later. I went on a date with this other guy, and I'm on this date, and immediately I'm like, fuck, I'm masked right now.
Yeah.
I'm hypervisibly visible. I'm glamoring the man. And what it looks like is like, when you start to look at it from, am I revealed or not? In the moments that you're not revealed, the only thing you really can do is watch what you get from it. And so here I was having this guy who was enamored by me. And I was like, oh, fuck. Because that's why I would glamour in the first place, right? To get all this attention.
Yeah.
It's like, well, what's true? It's like, what's true is I'm not interested in the guy. So why am I glamoring him? Why am I putting on this show, this facade, this like really likable personality when I'm not even interested in him?
Yeah.
And as I went through the date, I was like, I don't know what to do.
What's reaching?
Pardon?
Like, what's reaching out? That was like my inquiry, you know?
Yeah. And the thing is like, what I also realized in that moment was anytime I have a mask or a facade on, it just makes it easier for people to project their ideas onto you.
Yeah.
Right? They can't see who you are. They can't see the humanity of you. So of course they're going to use the facade that you put up as evidence of that being who you are. So when I lead with like the charisma and the personality, when I lead with the sass, when I lead with me on stage, that's who I think I am all the time. Well, guess what? I ain't that way all the time. I'm a see you next Tuesday most of the time. I don't give a shit about a lot of things. I have girlfriends who will send me messages and like try to recruit me into like whatever drama they're going into, and I'm like, I love you, but I don't give a fuck, right? And so the personality clashes with the truth of who I am because I wasn't being fully revealed. And then we tell ourselves all the stories of like, but that's not socially polite, blah 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 blah. But it's like, again, I've already had an experience where I wasn't hidden and had a great date. So I've already proven that story wrong. Have I mastered how to take down the glamour in real time? Fuck no. It's a practice. No. But it's being aware of like, well, why is it compelling to hide the truth of who I am? Well, because I get something out of it. But what do I lose in that moment? Like, people who comment inflammatory things just to get some false form of connection with you, love or hatred or whatever, what they lose is real connection, like real, vulnerable, intimate, deeply connected, deeply aligned.
That's what you lose.
Right? What do I lose on a date if I'm glamored? Honesty. I lose who I am. I lose everything, because even if this is the guy for me, I've set him up to fail because he thinks I'm some other version of me that I'm not. Well, that I'm not all the time, right? Yeah. So it's really funny because there's this like interesting spot where see me. There's like a deep desire and a deep need to be seen, but at some point it crosses the line and it becomes see me but don't receive the deepest part of it. Like, see the distractions, see the glitz, see the glamour, keep you occupied so that you won't look for the deeper thing. So you won't look what's behind the wall. Be content with the fantasy. And that's my experience of it. And what would you have to say?
I'm trying to like draw this parallel then from that end of the spectrum, because I think what's interesting about our discussion is that we exist over almost opposing ends of the spectrum, where I have the invisibility cloak and I'm sort of sitting with like what it is that I have got out of that. And man, the only thing that I can think of is confirmation of my belief system. Which is a horrible thing to have to keep confirming. Not fun at all. I don't, there was nothing to be gotten out of that other than confirmation of my belief system.
Well, yeah. And, I would say what you got out was not having to be in the flame of like your full expression.
Yeah, which actually, and I'm really glad that you've raised that, because there was so much messaging around my full expression being too much, right? I have all of these little memories of when I was younger, actually, that have remained in the shallows of my memory of kind of like just forgetting myself for a moment. It was hyper self-conscious, hemming it all in, and then I'd forget myself for a moment and come out, and there would be some reflection from somewhere that would I remember particularly, I don't know why this always stuck with me, but it kind of caused me to become very self-conscious, was just some boy in school being like, man, your facial expression was like mad just then, because I'd like laughed and I do have a very animated face, and I was like, oh. And it stuck, these things stuck. I'm like, oh, I need to hem this in.
I was thinking about this earlier today, where like as children, we took strokes from the universe that weren't true strokes to take.
Oh, can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I was thinking about it earlier today, actually. I was journaling about it because, I'm working through the hypervisible invisibility pattern. But for me, it wasn't that my full expression was too much. It was that my full expression wasn't preferred.
Okay.
And so I learned how to be what was preferable. So I couldn't be the kind of girl who had alone time. I had to be out and social. I wasn't allowed to be by myself in my bedroom. And not because like my parents told me no, but like there was certain scenarios that would teach me that the things that I needed weren't the preference of whatever room I was in. And so I learned how to like contort myself in different rooms to fit that, versus like as a kid, you're not going to know better. Like how as a
Right.
child was I going to be able to say, no, all of me is totally acceptable and you're a piece of shit for trying to convince me otherwise? Like I wasn't going to say that. I wasn't going to know that either. And even though my parents were very much in my corner about who I was, most of my fucked up strokes from life came from outside of my family unit, to be honest.
Yeah.
Came from my school, came from my extended family. It came from like outside my family, like my mom and dad. And then it would really fuck my parents up because they're like, what happened to our little girl? Like you like, I remember my mom said at one point I was so loving and like so affectionate, and then it died.
Yeah.
I'm still loving it.
Yeah, okay.
Them, but she's like, but you're not, like something went away, and I locked it away. Because
I really relate to that.
Right. And so the thing that I was sitting with was like, wow, as a kid, I really took that as like, oh, that's universal guidance.
Well, oddly, I feel like, yeah, I did the same. And even with that thing at the nativity play, and I'm like, where did I get that from? Like, I almost feel like there's some kind of past life memory of religious condemnation in there somewhere that had me interacting with life in that way. But you know, when you talk about taking strokes that aren't true to take as a kid, when you were talking about it, because I was like quite curious about what you meant, like the way that I guess the way that I've seen it, when I look at all of the ways that I was reflected back to as a child and had that, it's like you know, when I said that I had this memory of the nativity play, but I don't know why it was always in the shallows of my memory until something dormant in it activated and pulled whatever I was carrying out. And that is how I've engaged with a lot of memory, including a lot of my dream memories, is that I've had these memories of significant things and also things that don't seem that significant, and sometimes things that I didn't even realise carried pain until the dormant thing has been activated by whatever is now going on in my adult life. And then it's almost like it causes this chain reaction through time, and this whole thing that was blocked up gets opened out. So there is a kind of brilliance to those things, those strokes that we took. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. So this is the irony of it, right? It's like, well, had I been like the 12-year-old little girl who told my family member, no, I'm going to law school, with the post that I wrote today, I'll link it below, but like, you know, I'll just give you like kind of the Cliff's Notes. Basically, when I was 12, I had a family member tell me, like, there's no way you're going to be able to afford law school. As if at 12, I should have had that answer. Yeah. Right? Like, you don't even apply to law school until after your fucking bachelor's degree. Like, why are you asking me at 12 if I can afford law school? But to be the kind of 12-year-old who told that person no, wouldn't have actually led me down the path that led me here. Yeah. This is like the irony of like the spiritual path. It's like, this is also why I have a stance of like, quit trying to keep your kids away from trauma. Yeah. It's going to happen. Yeah. Whether you shield them from it or you are reckless with them and let them go head first, like it's going to happen. Because all of these things that we go through in life, they lead us somewhere we're supposed to be. And I trust that wholeheartedly. But it's like, we take these strokes that are off the spot when we're kids. Because if life was actually in service to our fullest expression, we still have to go through these like spots where we're not expressed to learn what it is to be expressed.
I'm not quite following. Last bit, but then rewind to what you talk about taking the stroke that's off the spot.
So we take the stroke that's off the spot because we're not ready to be there yet.
What do you mean by off the spot?
There's no child in the world who's fully expressed. I don't care what anyone fucking says. No child in the world is fully because the journey is to full expression.
Oh yeah, of course. Right? Because I mean, I guess my definition of fully expression is having like an integrated ego and identity structure, and as children, we definitely don't have that.
We don't have that. Yeah. And then as kids, we take strokes that give us a false identity, a false ego, like all the lies.
Yeah, right? Yeah. Okay.
But when we're sitting with truth, it's like, oh, but if it was a stroke that was true, it would have continued on to, like, we would still be radically expressed. We'd be these healthy, whole, integrated kids. It's like, no, that's actually just not the journey ever.
Yeah.
I had to let go. I had to take the stroke of self-abandonment to learn the journey of self-reclamation.
Right. You had to put the VR headset on in order to take it back off again.
Yeah. I mean, how am I supposed to be able to help other people reclaim who they are if I've never done it myself?
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
And
So
you
it's
know,
like,
this is really interesting. This is actually just raising something for me as well, which I don't know, maybe it's a bit off topic, I'm not sure.
give it to me
About
anyways.
about the, you know, like about the relationship we have to our, you know, our struggles and the adversity that we've been through, and our quote unquote trauma, and how it is on many levels essential to what it is that we can now teach and embody. And what is the question that I really want to ask though? Or is it a question? It's just an inquiry around that, like our relationship to that. I don't really know, actually. I've kind of lost my thread a little bit with it. There's something in there about the belief that you have to have been through these things in order to be able to teach these things, you know?
Yeah. But it's like, for me, the take that I have with it, it's like, because imagine if we didn't take the stroke that was like self-depriving.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Let me slow this down a little bit, right? Like, imagine if I never listened to someone who said, who I am is not. Imagine I just ignored it. And I just learned as a child, no, who I am is fully accepted. And who I am is totally okay. And who I am is totally chill. I'm perfect, whole, and complete at like 12. Let's just say.
But imagine the world where that was true.
Yeah, imagine a world where that's what I was believing at the time, right?
Yeah.
That's idealistic. It sounds beautiful. It sounds utopian.
Yeah.
But then look at what I would have to teach the world.
In order to actually, right, and that's it. That's the thing. Because I know it's not as simple as you either have all of these things and these hard things that you go through and then you teach, or you don't. And actually we all have a very, very individual and brilliant journey. We can often project, oh, it wasn't hard enough onto it, or it wasn't. Do you know what I mean? Like all the fucking time. I think that was what I was pointing to, was that, you know?
Well, and you said this earlier. You said something along the lines of like, I can't remember what it was now. But basically, each individual person has different like turbulence that they go through.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to know your turbulence. I can
when you're talking about being trauma-informed.
Right? Yeah. Like I can pedestalize you and pretend that like, oh, you have this perfect life and therefore blah, blah, blah. But that's not true. And this shows up actually when I teach money stuff, because people are like, oh, if I just had a rich family, my life would be so perfect. I'm like, do you know the problems that the rich people are having? They're not pain free. They got different problems, still problems. And those problems may actually weigh the same.
Yeah.
Right? And so when we look at like our journeys with being seen and being visible, it's like some people, their journey is quite literally like alienation and neglect. And their journey is going to be about, well, how do I alchemize that?
Yeah.
My journey is really about performance to hide. Because I know how to captivate a room. I know how to make everybody in that room love me. But they're only going to love the form of me that I'm willing to show them. But I
used to be really jealous of people like you. So fucking jealous.
But then the problem is that we're never really loved. We're loved for the performance. And so in those moments where the truth leaks through and the vulnerability and the honesty of who I am comes out, I have to face the fact that I'm losing friends because they don't like who I actually am. Right? And like, that's the hard part. It's like truth is always going to leak through. And even if you have an invisibility pattern where you're cloaking, eventually you're going to get seen. And then you have to be with the journey of being seen. That's scary. Yeah. Just like how if you're hyper performing, you're going to get seen. And then you have to be with it being seen. That's scary. It is scary to say, to like reveal your heart entirely to somebody and give them the option to leave you.
Yeah.
Versus performing so they never do. It is scary to reveal your heart and give them the option to be with you, than instead of hiding yourself and never giving them the option.
Yeah, but can you notice you actually put those two things side by side? It's like, can you feel, and I might, invite anyone who's watching this to like feel the difference between the two, and to feel like, when you were describing the just always performing to keep someone, and also then the other extreme of just hiding away and never giving yourself a chance to actually open, there's like it's like a sediment layer on my solar plexus, on my gut. And I think that I suppose there's a point where it's like that actually just becomes too painful. I was actually having a conversation with a client about this last night or the night before, because I'd written about it, how there's this point, and I believe you've written about it before. I remember a piece you wrote about how it becomes too fucking painful to close.
Yeah.
Point where you just, you may have, like, closing may have been the norm up until a certain point, but then when you actually start to open, there's an extremity to it that is deeply unsettling.
Absolutely. And I think it has a lot to do with being in your body. If you're in your body, you're like totally in yourself. Then the mechanism that comes in to like hide who you are. So for example, I think last year today, actually.
Oh, wow.
I was having a conversation. Yeah. I was having a conversation with a guy, and I pulled the cool girl performance card. Ladies, you know this one, where you're like, oh, I'm so nonchalant. I'm cool.
I know this.
I'm chill. Yeah. When secretly you're actually deeply chalant.
Yeah.
Right?
Intense as fuck. Yeah.
You're intense as fuck, and you like pretend that you're not. And so in this conversation, you know, he was from London. He was an architect from London, and he was coming into Montreal. And he's like, you know, I really wasn't prepared for how much I'd like you. And my response was like, yeah, I knew what I was getting myself into, right? Just like, I knew it. It's cool. It's fine. And then 6 hours later, I'm fucking spinning. I want to throw up, because that wasn't true. I didn't know what I was getting myself into. I had no fucking concept of what it would be like to like someone who didn't live in the same country at this extent. And so it was like 6 hours later, I texted him. I was like, hey, because at that point I was like crying in the park, because I was like, this physically hurts. The lie that I told him to uphold this cool girl nonchalant performance hurt, because then he doesn't get to feel the intensity of me and opt into that. I'll always have to hide this part of me that does dive headfirst into shit. I'll always have to hide it if I'm always pretending like I knew. And so I texted him, and I was like, listen, I have to be really honest about something I said earlier that wasn't completely true. And he's like, sure. Well, like, what's up? And I was like, when I said I knew what I was getting into, I didn't. I had no idea that I'd like you. I had no idea that I would be this open and receptive to you. And all of that was just kind of a cool girl attitude thing. That's not really me. And we ended up having this beautiful conversation where he's like, thank you so much. Like, yeah, that I didn't make that mean anything, but it did feel kind of off. But thank you. Like, this is an adult conversation, which it is, because the part of me that has to hide.
And they are beautiful conversations.
Yeah. But like the part of me that needed to hide is the child form of me. It's the adolescent side of me that's like, no, who we are isn't preferred. Let's be the preferable version. So to say I'm letting go of the preferential identity and actually showing you the truth of me, the mess and all, do you want to opt in, is actually much more of a consensual, sovereign interaction.
Absolutely. And there is so much perfection in that process, in that, you know, like I had this image when you were talking about it, when it was like physically hurting, like I'm in my body now. So when I speak an untruth like that, it physically hurts, and it's like gravel scraping across the tender thing that wants to open. And the gravel is actually like this kind of jangly, fractured part, the child, and then it's like that whole thing, and that being able to clean it up fully exposes it so that it can smooth out and slot back in, and then you've got another piece of your wholeness back.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so good to fuck up. That's why it's so good to fuck up and then see it and then say it, and then there's this like deepening of intimacy. It's actually a really beautiful, beautiful process. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. And like what was cool about that is that I couldn't at that moment have a marker, like a diagnostic of what it was like to be that connectable, like to have my heart unveiled and realize that wasn't the thing to send people away. It was the performance that was. It's the performance that keeps everyone at arm's length. But the actual revealing of who I am, it's like gives people the opt-in. And so, you know, sometimes I get nervous around like talking about like esoterics and stuff, because I'm like, are people really getting this? And there's like 6 people tuning in right now live. So if this is landing, please do let us know in the comments so we can have a little check-in. Because like there's multiple multiple layers to this, right? It's like I'm not revealed because I'm scared of what it means to be revealed. I hide who I am because it's preferred, or I hide who I am because it's safe. But all of those become responses and mechanisms that still keep us from the deeper, tender thing, which is true connection.
Yeah.
In the revealing, there may be people who leave. In fact, this guy that I had this beautiful opening with, because at that point I kept committing to like the fully revealed version of me. I think it was like 4 days later, he spun out.
Okay.
And he was like, I don't want this. But at that moment, the rejection was so easy to receive.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't, you don't want the performance, so therefore what performance can I be that you'll want? It was, you don't want the truth of me. Thank God I don't have to try.
Well, and this is the thing, right? It's so much more painful. Like, rejection is this thing of incredible pain for as long as we are going out of our way to protect ourselves from it.
Ooh,
and
yeah.
actually, and I'm not saying that we don't still experience pain in the face of rejection when we smooth that thing out, but actually there is probably like 97% less charge around rejection, or I'll say the perception of rejection, because, you know, what actually is it? And interestingly, I remember writing something. This is funny, actually, and this brings us back to the piece on people in comment sections. I did a piece of writing about how it's actually really impossible to experience rejection as, like I said, this thing of incredible pain, for as long as we have parts of ourselves exiled. We are always going to experience that. So that process of like bringing in all the parts of ourselves that we've rejected and exiled generally means then that we don't experience rejection. People may literally reject us. However, it doesn't confirm the belief system that causes the pain.
Oh, yeah.
And anyway, I wrote that in so many words. And someone commented going, I'm following for preaching.
Well, listen, like I love that, and I've been on
pretty attached to their pain.
Oh yeah, but like I've been on very similar threads around rejection as well, and it's like, what's being rejected? Because if I'm rejecting the truth of you because I don't want it, thank God I'm rejecting it. If I'm rejecting the identity and you're attached to it, it'll hurt, right? Like, and
it hurts then because we're not in relationship with what is beneath that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's like, as a silly example, it's like, oh, I dyed my hair blonde, and somebody goes, oh, I'm not into blondes. Well, what are you into? Let me be that. Let me morph myself. Versus like, oh, I actually am not into people who have integrity. Like, who are you beneath the performance? Who are you beneath the pattern? People can reject patterns all day long, and it's going to hurt because that's your ego and that's your identity. That is survival instinct that 5-year-olds, 10-year-old, 16-year-old you put in place. They're not rejecting you because they've never got to know you. And then if they get to know you and there's rejection, it's not something that hurts because you already have you.
Yes, you already have you. And that's it. I remember, you know, that I think it's a famous and probably exhausted Kurt Cobain quote that's like, I'd rather be hated for who I am than loved for who I'm not. And I remember like reading that as a kid and reading it and being like, well, it'd be awful to be hated for who I am. But then I realised, you know, as a kid, that the thing that has then matured into adulthood is this sense of like the fear of being hated for who I am is not actually the fear of other people hating me. It's the fear that I will believe them in the end, abandon myself.
Yes. So,
and of course, you know,
well, this is where I tell people, like, we gaslight ourselves first. When my family member was like, you're never going to be able to afford law school. What I knew in that moment was that I didn't need to afford law school because I could get a scholarship or an endowment fund. It was like, I had this deep knowing at 12. I was like, it's not really my problem. But what I told myself was that they were right. They're older. They must know better.
Yeah.
I have to trust them. I guess I have to let this go. I have to follow the more practical thing. What they said wasn't gaslighting me out of a reality until I gaslit myself.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you're never going to go to law school. It's like, we never know that. Well, you guys can't afford it. We don't know what's going to happen in 15 years. Like, you know, all of these things, it wasn't a reality until I believed it myself. And so the spot of like, I'm actually scared I'm going to believe them, comes back to like, can you trust your own holding of yourself in the spots where you're being revealed? And
they are the most painful places. They are the most painful places that I touch. You know, when I do this work, and this work really touches those places of, and you know, and then when you feel it, when you can feel the presence of the part, and this is what I have really been in deep process with, that has really been a big challenge, has been like feeling the part that is like, yeah, well, I will believe them, and then it's so hard to put into words, but there's something really, really quick that I've noticed that's all but burnt away. I don't want to speak too soon because, you know, there's always something new, but it's like the immediate detection of threat then, and then there's a clamp down, but then but then all of a sudden I am the part, and yes. But then I can see myself as a part. I know I've become the part, and I'm like, oh no, mayday, mayday, and then the practice is actually being surrendering through that.
Oh yeah. I mean, like, the first, like, 18 times you reveal who you are to someone, it's going to be clunky and a fucking mess. Because of all those mechanisms that, like, can't quite differentiate you and the pattern yet.
Yeah, I really appreciate that piece on the differentiation, because I think that's been,
Well, and it's just, like, it's an identity. Like, even this part of hiding, like, that's an identity that you need to stay hidden, under the radar, totally, you know, not seen. And it's like, that's all a lie to support whatever the belief system is, because the moment that you are seen is so confronting to the belief that you have upheld for fucking decades at this point.
Yeah.
You know, we could probably do a whole other conversation on this too, but
how long have we been talking for? What's the time?
It's like 2:30, so I think we've been talking for like an hour and a half. Yeah, we I love these. I love just like shooting the shit, seeing what comes up.
Right.
Yeah. So for those watching, I want to give Rae give her the stage to talk about her new program site, because it's very much tied to what we're talking about here too.
Yeah.
Tell us about it.
I think it was interesting actually when you reached out to invite me, because I realized, and I think I mentioned on my stories the other day, like it's like the bodies of work are really, really different, and yet also there are these like really striking similarities. But yeah, site. So it's a 4-month program that I'm opening in a couple of weeks now, actually. And I want to say first and foremost, I'm going to be doing a full transmission on this on Wednesday 11th at 5:00 in the evening UK time, and you can actually register for that via the link on my bio, and there is a recording as well if you can't make the live. But something that was coming through as I was sitting with that teaching today is that there are like 3 threads to it, and now I have to remember those threads. I should remember that, but for some reason my brain is like, oh, what are they? The first piece is, that's it. There's the relationship to seenness and being seen or unseen. And then the second thread is like the ability to translate what one is seeing, and having like a certain talent and a gift for it. And also then seeing all of the like shadowy, funky patterns that are baked into that, on account of the first strand being our relationship to being seen or unseen. But then the thing, and this is the thing that I had been like a little bit nervous about bringing out in my process and talking about. I was like, oh, it's weird stuff. And I was like, that's exactly why I've got to do this. But the thing that actually brings those 2 strands together is inner sight and the dream world, and the trance and visionary states. I found myself really, really talking about that a lot. It's a really, really central thread through my own path, because the way that my invisibility cloak worked was that I disappeared up inside my head from a very, very young age. I lived completely through the VR. I had an incredibly vivid imagination. I had very vivid dreams. I lived mostly inside of that world. I didn't feel my body really, you know, at all. And there is like enormous fucking magic in there, like so fucking big. And obviously I've spent the best part of the last 15 years pulling those threads down into the body so that magic can actually be like actualized and realized. So it's a conversation on being seen, and it's also a conversation on seeing the unseen. You know, there's a really common piece with all the people that I am talking to at the moment and in conversations with tend to be very visual, have flash images, vivid dreams, and just this gift of sight, basically. So yeah, it's going to be fun. Like, I'm really looking forward to the shamanic aspect of it and that realm of the work. It's going to be, yeah, and I can also see how the frequency is going to be kind of weaving its way through the dream worlds of the group. Like, I've been having a lot of dreams about it this week. Yeah. I'm very excited. So there's like the relational stuff and the worldly stuff, but it also has a very, very strong tie to the otherworldly stuff, the inner experience. Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. So, you know what's funny is, like, you know, you mentioned that like we're both kind of on the other side of like the same threads.
Yeah.
Because my Glamour is a 4-month program, which starts in like a week. And well, yeah, 10 days. It's almost 2 weeks, I guess. But Glamour is more so about, it's funny, it's like yours is going to be more for like the introverts who are like deeply mystical. And mine is like for the performance, the people who've like really put on a good show, the entertainers of the world who like want to be more deeply felt. Right? It's like the introverts, they're already going to be deeply feeling. And it's like, we're literally approaching the same realm from different angles.
Yeah, it's fucking fascinating, actually. Right? I'm really appreciating it. Yeah.
And like with Glamour in particular, you know, it's split into 4 pieces where it's like, what is your bravado? Because I think like that's been one of my, the downstrokes I've gotten around my bravado is pretty fucking nuts. But like, what is the persona you lean on? Like, what is the thing that takes you through stuff? Because that, I don't have a problem with bravado. The container isn't about like never having your bravado. It's like understanding the mechanism of it. And the mechanism of bravado is ultimately control. Yeah. Can I control the perceptions of others via being the preferred version of me in whatever room I need to be? Yeah. It's the people that are going to come into Glamour are going to be the chameleons of the world, the entertainers of the world, the ones who are like so good at being likable, but have a really hard time receiving love. And all of that is because there's a deep insecurity layer, which I often refer to like a parasitic insecurity, where it feels so sticky and so intense that the bravado is like, I can't let you see how nasty this thing is. Yeah. Because when I started working on a lot of my bravado stuff, that was the first thing that came up. I became super fucking insecure. I was like, oh my God, everything. It's just deeply, deeply insecure. And then what I started to realize was like, fuck, both the insecurity layer and the bravado layer are costing me everything I actually want. Connection, love, intimacy. And so then that takes us into like the final component of Glamour, which is exposure. It's not about being in the limelight. It's about turning on all the light. Yeah. And letting people see like the facade break. And, you know, I know that you've got a couple other courses that you're going to be rolling out as well. And like our bodies of work, even though they're so different in frequency wise and really for who they serve as well. Yeah. Both of them are like entry steps to like these bigger bodies of work. Yeah. Right? Like yours, you're a deep spiritual teacher. Mine, I have not gotten over there. So like your journey is going to be deeply spiritual in nature versus mine is more so about like the integration of human life. Yeah. Like, I don't care how revealed you are online if like when you talk to a guy you stutter. Like I don't care how revealed you are online if when you're having a conversation with your best friend that you're still biting your tongue. You know, like I'm on that. Yeah. Cool. Beautiful. Well, thanks for chatting today. Yeah, thank you. Well, it was your topic. I was just like, let's live stream on this. And I really appreciate the invitation. It's been brilliant, and I would really, really like to do it again sometime. Absolutely. We'll find the next thing that we vibe on and jump
Yeah.
from there. For those of you that are tuning in live, thank you so much. For those of you watching the replay, what I really love from our viewers is that you leave a comment saying, I'm leaving here with. It's a great way to digest the content you just consumed so you don't get energetically constipated. It's when things just kind of sit in your brain for a really long time, and then you end up distorting what the teachings actually are. So by commenting saying, I'm leaving here with, you leave with what you are here to receive, and nothing more, nothing less. So feel free to do that. And if you are interested in joining Sight with Rae or Glamour with me, you are more than welcome to shoot us a message in our inbox or use the links in our bios to register for upcoming events and programs.
Yeah.
Otherwise, thank you so much for joining me, Rae. I love you.
Yeah,
I wish you all,
thank you.
I wish you all the best with Sight
Thank
and
you. Yeah.
you know, unveiling of all of the things.
Yeah.
Why don't you and I end with I'm leaving here with?
Ooh, I feel like there are so many things. Right, I am leaving here with the thing that's really dropping in is that I'm leaving here with that reminder of what the real fear is when it comes to rejection. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm leaving here with the felt sense of where my bravado kicks in and where I open to the deeper thing.
Lush. Thank you.
Awesome. Mwah. I love you.
Love
Thank you
you.
everyone for tuning in, and I'll see you later.
Bye.
Bye.